What's going on, everybody? Good morning, good evening, wherever you are and whatever time it is. Welcome back to another video with your man, Measureholic. Today, ladies and gentlemen, we are getting started on episode 10 of our Spartan Pharaoh campaign for Divided Impera in Total War Rome 2. That's right, we've made it to episode 10. We were not wiped out. This is probably my most successful migration campaign I've done, although it is one of the smaller ones. Admittedly, we didn't really go that far from Sparta. But anyway, I will leave a comment down below underneath this video and I'll pin it, and in it will be timestamps for you to have a little bit more of an easier time viewing this video for your viewing pleasure. So do be sure to use that in case you can't sit and watch us all in one sitting. But anyway, ladies and gentlemen, last episode we began our war against the Seleucids, and this episode will be a continuation of that. We took one of their outlying towns in Anatolia, but now it is time for General Cleomenes III to lead a massive force of Spartans against a massive force of Seleucids. They have a very elite army stationed inside the city of Tarsus, and it really shows a lot of promise for the war ahead. Let's get into it. And here is a look at our massive army. We're bringing about, I think it was 7,000 or 8,000 men to the battle. They are bringing the same amount of numbers, and it is going to be a proper slog. We of course have our auxiliaries on the left-hand flank, a massive amount of Galatians in contingent. We have mercenary Galatians at the front, and then we have the auxiliary Galatians who are naked or half naked in the rear. I know that's funny to say, naked in the rear, but anyway. And then in the center, of course, we have our Spartan pike phalanx presented towards the enemy, with some Syrian heavy archers backing them up, followed by Cleomenes himself, who will be holding down the left-hand flank of the army. He has his Syrian, actually no, they're not Syrian, they're African elephants at the moment. We will upgrade to Syrian, but they're also accompanied by some Egyptian swordsmen. Then we have some Perioikoi swordsmen here on the right-hand flank. Unfortunately, the reinforcing army that we brought to help out Cleomenes isn't really a properly built army. It's basically just a clump of swordsmen and auxiliaries, and as such, you're seeing it here. We're just seeing a massive amount of Galatians. We do also have a large Anatolian contingent of axemen, so they will be very helpful in dealing with the more heavily armored units. On the far extreme right-hand flank, though, we have a large amount of cavalry, compared to the left-hand flank, which only had one unit, I think. And then we have some more swordsmen to back them up, but then we also have some pelters in the rear. I'm going to be trying to use pelters a little bit more in our army composition. But being such a massive force, it takes us a very long time to engage the enemy. We probably spend a good 10 minutes of the battle just marching forward. You can see just how long this shot takes of our entire army, just how massive and how grand the scale of this battle will be. As we continue, I'm trying to move my army up in groups. I'm not moving it all at once. I'm usually moving either the left-hand flank forward first, followed by the center, and then the right, or vice versa. I don't try to issue orders all at once across everything. And again, I'm not using the Control G or the numbering system for grouping units. I just don't really like it too much. I prefer using Alt to move my troops around and just using my mouse to slide them back and forward wherever I want them to go. It's just my style. But I'm sure I'll work on that in the future as I try and do a little bit more professional handling of my troops, or basically just not be a pleb. But anyway, the battle kicks off on the right-hand flank. We have our massive cavalry contingent going up against their large cav contingent and their Syrian heavy elephants. They have Syrian heavy elephants, possibly the best elephant units in the game. They do have the best stats, but I'm not sure if they have the largest mass. I believe Indian elephants might be larger. Either way, they're a massive threat to us. So instantly I'm going to have our cavalry try to surround that elephant unit, pummel it with their javelins, and then we also have our spearmen getting involved, followed by our pelters, all focusing fire very, very heavily on the elephants. This is probably the #1 threat to my troops. If I can take it out early, then I can be a little bit more reckless with my units as the battle fully kicks off. And our mass targeting works out just fine. We ended up killing a lot of their cavalry as well. But in response to that, they ended up charging across the left-hand flank. And they charged us at a very awkward angle where they're not even engaging my right or my center anymore. They're just all focusing on our left-hand flank. So that's going to be very awkward to deal with. But as a result, I pushed forward some of my right-hand flank outlying troops. I didn't fully commit because I wasn't sure if this was all of the enemy troops or not. And I did want to hold back in case they ended up attacking my center, but they never really did. They mainly just focused on attacking my left-hand flank, and they're going to swarm it. So as a result, I'm trying to let my Galatians get their javelins out and then get a charge, and they're going to be a lot more useful if I can get them a solid charge. We got a decent charge, but there is just so many units here. And like I said, the army that is stationed inside the city, not the garrison, the army itself, has a lot of elite tier units. The Seleucids have a very good Hellenic style roster. Very similar to like Epirus. They have some excellent pikemen, great swordsmen, excellent cavalry. They just got a lot of good things that I don't want to be going up against. And so I'm going to be starting to lose a lot of my cheaper units quite early on. You can already see just looking at the bottom of the screen. Half of my swordsmen, half of my spearmen have been taken out that were on the right hand flank. Our Galatians are getting smashed. Our auxiliaries are taking a lot of damage. However, our Spartan pikemen aren't really engaged right now, so that is kind of holding us back a little bit. But moving forward though, we're doing really well to wrap up the right hand flank. We're basically just doing recharges all across the center of their line now. And we managed to hunt down and slaughter the enemy general. He tried to run away, so I sent like 5 units to chase him down, which is a lot, but I think it was worth it. And since the enemy army focused on our left-hand flank, I was able to dissect it and slide in my elephants into the middle. And now I'm going to have almost complete freedom to charge them where I so please. I see a few enemy units wavering on the left-hand side, and so obviously I need my elephants over there. If we can get a couple units to rout, then it's going to encourage more of the enemy units to rout. And so that's my immediate plan. On the right hand flank, there is a lot of Seleucid troops that are still holding out though. They're kind of like towards the rear a little bit more, the top right of the screen. But I'm going to try and focus on the major blob of enemy troops first, and then we'll worry about the right hand side. But yeah, we get a very beautiful charge in with our elephants. It doesn't cause immediate routing, but it does contribute. And then I send in General Cleomenes and some more troops. And then we start getting some mass routes happening. Even though some of our own troops routed just from the amount of losses that they took, the elephants are just doing fantastic. And I'm really careful to try and keep giving my elephants attack orders. You don't want them to stay stagnant in the fighting. You want them to keep moving, to knock enemy infantry over and just keep charging into them and causing morale penalties. But before they could even charge into the rear contingent of the enemy, the rest of their army routs en masse. Us assassinating their general really had a major impact. And once their elites started routing, that was it. The battle was over. The Seleucids, they're on the back foot now in this war. And we have a decisive victory. A massive amount of troops were involved in this fight. The enemy lost 6,000 men in the battle. Their entire army was wiped out. We ended up losing 2,000 men, which is quite substantial. However, the majority of that was in auxiliaries, which are fairly replaceable. It is still a bit of a shame we lost so many, but it's worth paying the price for us to have a very favorable look moving forward in this war. We're going to occupy the city of Tarsus, and it will now be permanently under Spartan management. Moving forward, King Arius is besieging Antioch with another Spartan army backing him up. I debated for a while if I wanted to fight this or not. I kind of did, because it's Antioch. It's, you know, a famous city. It's a capital of the Seleucids. But we have so many more battles to cover. I just figured, you know what? I'm just going to auto it. We lose just a few hundred men for taking Antioch. Like I said, the capital of the Seleucids. It's going to be a very good moneymaker and will help us have a strategically important position in Syria. But yeah, it's a bit of a 50-50. It would have been fun to fight in the city of Antioch, but the battle was just so easily in our favor, it wasn't worth it. So now that the war is going so well in our favor, I'm now really trying to hurry up my armies and get them rolling into enemy territory. where I'm wanting to take the territory at least. I'm not trying to rush east into like Babylon and the far eastern provinces of the Seleucids. I just want the west. So we're focusing on Syria and now Palmyra. We now have the city besieged. They do have a decent garrison along with a general who has some elite units with him. But again, it's kind of the same story as Antioch. I'm not really wanting to fight it manually, so I won't. But instead, we're going to cruise up back to the north and look at Thapsacos. General Cheraphon is actually going to be leading an assault on the town itself. He has his complete Spartan hoplite army. He has his Anatolian axemen and Thracian mercenaries. It's going to be a fun battle. Let's do it. Now, hopefully this won't be a long battle. The odds were fairly in our favor, but way too much in the enemy's favor for me to auto-resolve, and this is such a Spartan-heavy army, I do need to be careful with it. But at the beginning of the battle, the enemy actually does a really smart thing, and they charge the cavalry out of the settlement. They do get a little bit stuck on the buildings because we had pushed our line up so far to stop them from charging out, but they will get some rear charges on my Spartan units, and it won't really kill too many of us. But any Spartan that's lost is always going to be a tragic loss for us, because it's so hard to replace. Our population of true Spartan citizens is really, really low, and it's going to stay low throughout the entire campaign. It's just how it is when you play as Sparta. Even if you completely min-max, it's hard to pull it off well. So it's not a great start to the battle, but eventually we will hunt down their cavalry, and then the rest of their army comes charging out of the town, and this is where we will shine. Our hoplites are in formation, their phalanx is ready, their shields are ready to crush the enemies before them. This is where our hoplites are going to be doing their best work in just front-on, hand-to-hand combat. And in addition, we also have our auxiliaries going into the city and coming out of the streets and attacking the enemy from behind. So now our hoplites are crushing the enemy from the front, and our auxiliaries will be coming in to stab them in the back as well. And for the most part, the plan works quite well. We do start to take some losses on the right-hand flank with our General's bodyguard unit, but that's your boy General Cheraphon. He doesn't care about these things. He's more than willing to put himself on the line. He's a true Spartan warrior leader, and so he will be leading the charge in this battle. Eventually our axemen and Thracians will get involved here. This is our axemen throwing their javelins before they get into the fight. Very useful unit. They have some really good armor penetration, and they're fairly fast, so they'll catch these lighter units before they can escape back into the town. And even then, we have units in the center of the town already that are coming up to hit the enemy from behind. And then of course our Thracians are coming to get involved as well. They're very high armor penetrating, very aggressive in general, most of the Thracian units, so they'll be very handy at killing the enemy's hoplite units, which are a bit of a pain to kill. Our Spartan hoplites will easily outclass us any day of the week, but hoplites always take quite a long time to kill anything, really. Even going up against like levy units, they will still take a while. They're just not a fast killing unit, but here with this charge you can see just how deadly and how skilled the Thracians are. They're going to be very useful in our armies moving forward. But with that surround and the enemy cavalry being dealt with, it just was too much. General Cheraphon continues leading the push into the town. All of our hoplite units are making massive breakthroughs. There is a couple enemy units that are trying to hold out before in front of Cheraphon himself, actually. And so he's more than happy to rise to the challenge and charges directly into them, while the rest of the army swarms the enemy streets. But by that point it's just too late. There's just too many holes in their defenses. They would have been better off staying inside the town most likely and trying to outflank us with cav. But at this point it just doesn't matter. General Cheraphon's bulldozer is just way too strong, and he rolls right on over them. Take another settlement from the Seleucids. Here are the stats if you want to see them. General Cheraphon getting a very respectable amount of kills himself, getting over 200. Most of our other hoplites are doing fantastic. We lost very few of them. The Thracians did quite well. Our cavalry did well. Pretty much everybody did well. The only issue with this army is that we're using helot archers, which are pretty pathetic, and I either need to replace them or just not bother using them. I think it's kind of hard to say. We could get some Syrian heavy archers instead, but they are fairly expensive, and we don't really have a lot of money at the moment. it's going up and down quite a lot, and we have a lot of armies that are causing a lot of upkeep, so that's why I tried to favor using cheaper archers. For example, over here in Palmyra, this is our auxiliary army that usually defends Egypt. It is marching on Palmyra with Cleomenes now. He had actually caught up and was helping them march. Cleomenes' army actually took a lot of losses in this assault on the city, and I know this was very reckless, but I also want to completely disband Cleomenes' army and then give him a completely new one out of the new units that we'll be receiving soon through reforms. But after that, we now have almost all of Syria under our control. We have the major city in Palmyra under our control, and the Seleucids came to me asking for peace. So instead of instantly accepting it, we're doing a bit of negotiating. Basically what we get is a lot of money, and we get the Seleucids as a client state.
I go to offer sacrifice to Athena, who has blessed us all with wisdom.
Yes, bless us with wisdom, mate. So that will be very helpful moving forward, and it will give us a nice buffer in the east. However, the Aetolian League over in Greece instantly breaks their non-aggression pact with us, which kind of is a bit of a telltale sign of things to come. The Greeks, who are still independent of our influence, are not happy with us. They do not like seeing us being such a dominant empire in the Mediterranean. But speaking of being dominant, we now finally reached the thorax reforms, or the reforms of Nabis, the last king of Sparta. This is going to be a very useful reform in that it will give us very good Spartan swordsmen to use. They're going to be incredibly helpful, and we'll be seeing them be used later on in this video. I really look forward to showing you guys those units. But beyond that, I was kind of disappointed there wasn't more units. I was surprised. There's a couple other units that we will be using as well, but the main highlight of that reform is now our swordsmen are going to be far better, and our hoplites will also be even better. But back down here in Egypt, we're actually getting a lot of disturbances. The Siwa faction declared peace with Egypt and then accepted to becoming a client state to them. Egypt has a small little holdout settlement in southwestern Libya down here. We've just been ignoring them this whole time because Cyrenaica and the Siwa faction were keeping them pinned in, but now Siwa's just declared war on us. So that's going to be a very big issue for us, and if we ignore it for too long, it may threaten our heartland in Alexandria. So we're going to have to send down an army or two to deal with it as soon as possible. But in the meantime, back in the north, our Thracian ally that we liberated in the last video has now just been taken out. Macedon has a very large confederation of Thracians behind them, and they're basically trying to become the dominant power in Greece. Which of course, we being the protector of the Greeks, we cannot allow. So we'll take them out, and that will be our next current goal. Things in the east are fairly stable. The Seleucids will be our buffer from the Parthians and the Mauryan Indians. And in the meantime, I'm also going around trying to get alliances with other factions. We already have the Lusitani as a defensive ally in Iberia. We have Syracuse now joining us. We have Rome. We have Cyrenaica, who we've had for quite a long time now. In addition, I'll be also chasing an alliance with Massalia, which is, as it almost always is in every campaign I ever do, a predominant power in its position in Gaul and northern Italy. It's very useful indeed. We initially get some non-aggression from them with some money, but after that we will get a defensive alliance with Massalia. It's basically just to try and give me a little bit of backup, a little bit of insurance policy against people like the Kartli over here in the east wanting to declare war on us. If they do, they declare war on basically half of the map. So hopefully they'll be hesitant. We'll see if they are. But I am definitely concerned about the Kartli's presence. They are definitely holding a lot of sway over their neighbors, and they have a lot of territory themselves. So that's going to be a possibly big issue while we begin our campaigns in Macedonia. But for all intents and purposes, our war with the Seleucids is done. We're all done expanding in the east. Now it is time for us to look west. And so, after a few months of preparation, about a year or so actually, we now are attacking the Macedonians directly. We're sending them a declaration of war. This will bring the Triballi Confederation and the Aetolian League into direct war with us, and the Odrysian usurpers to the north will also end up joining the war eventually, at least most likely. They're not allied right now, but they're allied with some of their allies, so basically they won't like us. And so to begin this war off, General Cherifon will be leading a massive army of Spartans towards the Aetolian League's heartland. He'll also have a small army to back him up. That will be of basically some Greek allies led by General Nabis, the man responsible for the Thorax reforms that we've just undergone, basically. I was a little bit worried about leaving Athens since there is a large Macedonian naval presence outside of it, but we do have a massive garrison there, so it should be okay. So that's our first move of the war. We're moving on to Larissa, the Aetolian League's capital, and then up here in the north, though, we are focusing on King Arius leading his large army against the Thracians. And now he is not messing around. He wants revenge against the Thracians himself. And here he is presenting us with his brand new super weapon, the Syrian heavy elephants. That's right, now that we own Syria, we may as well recruit from there, right? And he is, King Arius is showing us just the benefits of owning Syria. You have Syrian heavy elephants, and we also have Syrian heavy archers. They're not called Syrian heavy elephants, at least I don't think they are, but they should be. They are quite heavily armored considering that they're elephants. Beyond that, though, King Arius has a fairly kind of stable army. He doesn't have any of the thorax units just yet. He has some auxiliary cavalry that we're seeing here move forward to deal with the enemy's navy that's landing some troops to help out. He also has hoplites, not hoplites, pikemen I should say, and then auxiliary axemen. But our cavalry are going to march forward, and since the enemy inside the town is trying to stay in the town, these troops will be slaughtered down here. We've seen this battle kind of before. It's going to play out in a very similar fashion. We basically had to do this battle in the last video. So I'm trying to use my cavalry to bait the enemy to come out and face us like men outside of the town. Instead, they're hiding behind their little mud huts and all of that. So King Arius is eventually going to lose patience on this. But we will get some kills with our skirmisher cavalry, but our skirmisher cavalry will also really take a lot of losses, especially now after they dealt with the naval units that had landed. The enemy has quite a few skirmishers and archers and just generally things that throw projectiles, so that's going to be a big issue for us. But like I said, with King Arius losing his patience, he will move his army forward all at once, and the Syrian archers will do their duty, which is to kill the enemy from afar with extreme precision. These guys are incredibly useful, and here we see an entire unit of enemy archers getting decimated within just a few seconds. But even still with that, the enemy refuses to come out and meet us on the field of battle, so instead we're going to have to split up our army into smaller contingents. Axemen will be going to the far left, Galatians to the far right, and then our pikemen will be heading up the center, up the main street. And we'll be using our cavalry when appropriate, but half of our cav ended up taking pretty heavy casualties early on, so that's going to be a bit of a pain. But generally speaking, we're just trying to surround the settlement now, and we're going to be charging down the streets towards the enemy. And we begin on the left-hand flank here with our axemen. They'll be getting involved in some other axeman-style units, so their fight there is going to go okay, but if they keep sending so many units to back up their own, we may end up losing that fight, so I got to support it as quickly as I can. Our archers are beginning to bombard the enemy's main street, and then on the right hand side we have our Galatians moving forward with some pikemen in reserve, but I'm not really going to use those pikemen too much since the enemy didn't present units over there. But now that we've moved up basically to be inside the city with our pikemen, the enemy will now finally come out and engage us. Our archers are now running out of ammunition, which kind of sucks, but that's okay. We still got a lot of kills with them, and we provoked the enemy into finally charging out. And our pikemen should be doing very well against them. Here's the general's bodyguard unit charging on into our own troops. He is hiding back in the center of town. But in the meantime, I sent forward my elephants, and now I wanted to do something really different with them, just to see how good the Syrian elephants were. And instead of having them charge the enemy from behind, I'm going to sandwich the massive enemy infantry blob by charging my elephants into the front of them, and then I'm going to have some cavalry that's been hiding on the docks now for quite a while, come up and attack the enemy in the rear. And of course, King Arius will be getting involved in the fighting shortly as well. He's not going to sit back and watch the fighting and not participate at all. So our elephants charge in, and they do quite good work considering that they are charging head-on into units that do consist of spearmen and skirmishers, units who can really affect elephants. And we will end up losing one or two of our elephants actually. You can see a couple of them dying in the background. But for the most part, our elephants do pretty fantastic. And we'll see that shortly by looking at our stats. But with that charge, and with just so many other units charging down the streets, the enemy garrison ends up surrendering en masse. And so, ladies and gentlemen, here are the statistics if you do want to see them. Like I said, our elephants did fantastic, getting over 500 kills themselves, which is pretty incredible considering they charged headlong into enemy troops. Admittedly, they weren't the most elite troops, but it's still quite impressive to see how one single unit can pay for itself quite easily. And these elephants are very, very costly, but I think they're worth it. Anyway, our first strike against the Macedonians works. We take out the Thracian town that had just fallen to the Macedonian Thracian allies. So that will help us out. It'll give us a bit of a springboard into Thracia. And now, however, we are focusing back on General Cheraphon leading a massive battle against the Greek Aetolian League. And so here we are outside the town of Larissa. Since the enemy is quite numerous and fairly elite, although known as elite as our Spartan hoplites, our Spartan thorax hoplites, mind you, these are now the newly reformed hoplites that we're using. We will be holding our position outside of town to the south on a hill while we wait for our reinforcements. We have some Greek cavalry up here on the right hand flank, combined with some more Anatolian axemen. There's a bunch of different kinds of Anatolian axemen you can get, by the way, which is generally very helpful. The majority of them have quite similar stats and all are fairly good with their armor piercing, so I really like having them on our flank. In case you haven't figured it out by now, I mention them in almost every single battle that we've had so far since we've taken Anatolia. But anyway, here are our newly reformed Spartan thorax hoplites. They now have a red and almost like a purple or a deep blue, I call that purple color scheme, at least to the helmets. They're basically just looking more fabulous. Shields are looking massive. They have the same size spears, which is always good enough. And they're just looking pretty all around excellent. In the center we of course have General Cheraphon. And then in the rear, behind him, we also have some Syrian heavy elephants. Almost every single army that is a professional army for this campaign will now be consisting of elephants, or at least for now. It'll be changing as we lose them and as the campaign develops. But initially, with all the armies that we had in Syria, I wanted to give as many elephants as possible. And so it's going to hurt our economy, but it will be worth it. On the left-hand flank, we have some more Greek cav, and in the rear, we have some siege equipment to try and draw the enemy out of the town. And in the far left, in the trees over there, you can see we have some Thracian swordsmen hiding out, waiting to ambush the enemy from behind, hopefully. But we'll see pretty quickly, though, that the plan instantly goes badly. As always, in Rome 2 Total War, the enemy reinforcements are coming from a completely strange place, and somehow they're coming from behind us to the left. And so they find our ambush very quickly, and we have to rotate our whole battle line to be ready to deal with it. Our Thracians are getting cut down by the enemy skirmishers, and so we send in our cavalry to charge in a little bit suicidally into the axemen and their own cavalry. But this charge will give our Thracians enough time to fall back up into the hill with the rest of our army, and they will eventually all be saved after taking some relatively decent casualties, unfortunately. But then our cav will fall back, and as they do, our siege equipment will begin bombarding the enemy just nicely, and we'll be getting quite a few nice kills on the enemy cav in particular, which will be very helpful. Finally, though, our reinforcements begin to arrive, and as they do, I rearrange our army's composition. I basically just rotate some of our units that were on the right-hand flank over to the left to give a little bit more support, since we have a enemy army reinforcing the main contingent almost coming from straight behind us. So that really sucked. But thankfully, that contingent went towards the town and then regrouped with the enemy army, and now the enemy army is coming outside of the town towards our position. I guess our siege equipment scared them enough and warranted a push up a very defendable position. So they're playing right into our hands for now. However, the enemy army does have a lot of troops, and we're not really seeing all that many, so I was a little bit put off by this, but I mean, I gotta go off what I see, and right now all I see is Greeks charging into a Spartan concrete wall on a hill, which is always going to end badly for them, even though they do have some archers that are pouring in fire on General Cheraphon's unit in particular. They're obviously terrified of him and are trying to hunt him down, probably paying extra for whoever ends up killing him with their arrow. But across the entire line, our units are pretty much getting engaged. Our right hand flank was a little bit more loose, so I'm going to be using our reinforcements to try and flank around the enemy as quickly as possible. And on the far left hand flank we'll be doing the same, but we don't have too many units there, so I won't be focusing too heavily on that. What we did focus on, though, is eliminating the enemy cav. Greeks, generally speaking, have quite good cavalry, and so I'm trying to use my skirmishers to kill them. And while that happens, of course, charging in our elephants into the rear of the enemy. Our hoplites were holding very nicely and getting a lot of kills, but now it is time to end the battle and send in the elephants, who will do some massive morale damage, and they will get a lot of kills as well. About half of the army is already fleeing, the rest of them are about to. And like I said, we're just getting a lot of kills. It's going very well so far. The enemy has played right into our hands by charging up the hill. And shortly after that rear charge from the elephants, we basically get a all-out rout from the enemy. You can see a lot of them are running already, and many more are dying. We did lose a couple of our elephants, unfortunately, but losing just one or two is worth it since they're pretty easily replaceable. They belong to like the foreigner population of our social class, I believe. However, after all of these troops retreated, the battle didn't end, and so I kind of started to think, well, hang on, something's wrong here, because one, the battle should have ended, and two, that didn't seem like all that many troops that were coming out at us. And so I sent my cavalry forward, and then wouldn't you know, Total War Rome 2 doing Rome 2 things, half the enemy's massive army is glitched out in the middle of town. I don't know why this happens. I'm not sure what triggers it. Maybe it's avoidable, maybe it isn't. But all I know is that it's happening to us, which really sucks. The enemy's running around in circles for some reason over there, so we're going to have to send our entire army forward. Our siege equipment is now out of ammunition, so we're now going to have to engage the rest of their army basically on equal terms. We will have them surrounded, but it still won't bode as well for us since we don't have long distance firing capabilities anymore, so we're going to have to engage them. We do have some pelters which will draw the enemy out of their little glitch state over here, but it won't draw them all out en masse, and it will be a very awkward engagement for us considering that we're starting to fight in these small little narrow streets now, so we're gonna have to be careful about that. We don't want our hoplites to get out of formation. Formation is everything for them. But meanwhile, back in the center of town, the enemy's general is hiding in the town with his cavalry bodyguard unit, so we managed to surround him and slaughter him basically pretty quickly. We send in some spearmen to outflank him, and they'll get quite a few kills with their javelins, and then our cavalry will also engage. But in the meantime, the enemy army is almost completely unglitched out now, and they are now charging forward towards our hoplite battle line that we presented to them. General Cheraphon's unit will be taking the brunt of the charge from the enemy, but while that's happening, we'll also be pushing on the left and the right hand side. And we even have some Thracians coming in here from the rear of the city to get involved and get some nice rear charges. And the elephants are at the ready. Here they come charging in. I'm focusing on the more professional units to charge them into, since our elephants are fairly damaged from the previous fighting they've been doing. Even though they're not really tired anymore from their previous fights, they have taken a lot of hit point damage, so they will still be a little bit more fragile than normal. But they do get a beautiful charge into some enemy professional hoplites, so that was a really good target for us. It will help us disrupt them and kill them quite quickly. And then, as always with elephants, I try to give attack orders shortly after, and so I'll be having them charge on into the blob of enemy infantry, which will cause quite a few units to rout, but not en masse initially. It did take quite a bit of micromanaging and just a lot of grinding time. I basically cut out about 15 minutes of us fighting this blob, where the enemy just refused to retreat for quite a while because they were all fresh. So that really sucked, and we were going to take quite a lot of casualties due to this glitch. But at the end of the day, though, we lose a lot of our auxiliaries, we lose quite a lot of our elephants, but we will still win the Battle of Larissa. The Aetolian League is now out of the game. It's just the Thracians and the Macedonians we're going to focus on now. And here are the statistics, if you do want to see them. We had about 5,500 Spartans facing up against over 7,000 Aetolians, and we smashed them. We killed over 6,000 of the enemy without even chasing any of them down, so that's quite impressive indeed. And then the rest of the garrison gets slaughtered because we took the town. They will have a general's bodyguard unit retreat into the hills because the general ran away like a coward. However, we will hunt him down with our lighter Peltast army, led by General Nabis, and he will kill him. So the Aetolians are basically done now, which is awesome. Gives us a little bit more ground in Greece, which of course it should be. Greece belongs to Sparta. We are its protectors. However, things start to change when I send a spy over towards Pella. Pella itself looks pretty vulnerable, but then we look around Pella, and it's an entirely different story. They have almost 3 completely full stack armies all around the city, and they are almost entirely comprised of elite Greek units. The Macedonians have a massive amount of troops. I don't know where they came from. Perhaps they were busy fighting the Illyrians. They hold a lot of territory in Illyria and over in the northeast towards Thracia.
You have further orders?
This is going to be a really big issue for us. We don't have the men to combat so many. And as such, we send General Cherephon forward to a river in between Larissa and Pella to try and stop the Macedonians, but they instantly jump at the challenge to fight us, and they send in over 10,000 Macedonians against General Cherephon. This is going to be a dire one. And here we are on the battlefield. This is a river defensive crossing battle, and it is very, very imperative that we win this. This could change the entire rhythm of the war. So far it's been going steadily in our favor, but right now this is a very desperate defense. If General Cherephon loses this, there are no other armies in Greece to back him up. The only other army that we sent to deal with the Macedonians was King Arius, and he's over in the east towards Thracia and whatnot. So that's going to be just a really big loss for us if we lose this battle. We have a lot of our same units that we were using before. We're trying to focus the majority of our troops on the river crossing since it's larger, harder to defend, and our reinforcements should also be coming towards the bridge anyway. So the bridge will be a smaller, be using a smaller detachment. But here in the rear, we see our new thorax swordsmen. They are our brand new swordsman unit that we get with the thorax reforms. They're looking awesome. I really love the look of them, and they will hopefully be very helpful in this battle and future battles to come. But this will be the first time that we're actually using them in combat. General Cherephon was able to recruit them before the Macedonians met us at the river. And then of course there's our last shot of him up there. And now the battle begins. The Macedonians, like I predicted, focused mainly on the river crossing. However, the bridge crossing is still being contested, and they are trying to charge our infantry with some cavalry and stop us from getting a good foothold on the bridge. But unfortunately, they're just too slow and not really planning out their charge well enough, so our hoplites will push the enemy cav back, and we will hold the bridge for quite a while. Back down by the river crossing, we're basically having a staring contest where we're killing the enemy with our siege equipment. But then back towards the bridge, the enemy's army is sending forward some very elite swordsman units. So what I'm going to try and do is give the enemy a little bit of breathing room to get off the bridge, and now we're going to try and recharge these elite swordsmen with our Syrian heavy elephants. And the elephants will come in very helpful, but it is super risky because, as you can see, there's a massive amount of skirmisher fire coming in from the enemy. And so if I'm going to be real reckless like this, our elephants stand a real chance to die quite quickly. So it's a massive risk, but if it pays off, it will secure us the bridge quite quickly and easily. But now back towards the river crossing, the enemy is charging on force. They send forward their cavalry, which is a bit of a stupid move, but most of these cav units are skirmisher cav units, so they're going to get a lot of free kills on our units before they charge in, since they'll be using all of their ammo. I try to rotate my pelters and my swordsmen back and forward to see whoever can get the most kills with their javelins, so that will help us out a little bit in defending against the enemy cav. But basically, the bridge battle is going very good for us, but the river crossing is not. Our elephants are making a massive difference though, and with them charging in for a second time, a lot of the enemy units begin routing, and the units that are left is like one cavalry unit and then some skirmisher units, which are good at killing elephants, but they're also very vulnerable to elephant charges. And since it's fairly close quarters now, I'm just going to send the elephants charging across the bridge completely, and we end up basically wiping out the entire enemy contingent at the bridge. But keep in mind, the enemy has 10,000 men involved in this battle, so they're still receiving a constant stream of reinforcements to the battlefield, so we will have to kill a few more isolated units around the bridge, but the majority of their reinforcements are going here at the river crossing, and the river crossing is getting incredibly dire now. They're committing with all of their pikemen, all of their spearmen, everything they got, they are throwing it at us, and once we kill those units that they're throwing at us, they still have more coming onto the battlefield. It's just a never-ending stream of Macedonian warriors and soldiers against our own. Thankfully, we do have our pelters coming in on the riverbank to kill a lot of the enemy for free, and our pelters are decent enough that they can get into a melee fight and do relatively well. They even have a melee attack of 10, so they will get quite a few kills, but all of these Macedonian troops are elite. They are very, very good. They are highly trained, and as such, they will be getting a lot of kills on our mid-tier units. Spartan hoplites will be doing well, however, when the enemy gets their pikes down, that's when we're going to be seeing some massive issues occurring. Thankfully, the river disrupted most of the enemy pikemen's formation. However, some of them were getting across onto dry land, and they were getting their pikes down, which was causing a massive issue for some of our Spartan units. You can see some of them are almost entirely obliterated, but they refuse to retreat, as any Spartan should. While that continues though, I am sending forward the bridge contingent of troops that we had. I'm trying to outflank their river crossing troops, but again, they are receiving reinforcements. And those reinforcements, combined with some of the extra troops that they had at the river crossing, they will try to intercept our big outflank play that we're making here. It's almost too little too late at this point. Even though we have a decent charge coming in with some elephants and cavalry, like I said, the enemy turns around to anticipate and to intercept our troops coming in. And even when I do get my elephants deep into the enemy's lines, the lines are so thick that our elephants aren't even going to affect the front line of Macedonian troops that are engaging with our hoplite wall. General Spartathon is completely committed to fighting now. All of our units are committed, and the whole battle basically relies on our elephants doing a miracle work here, and they unfortunately just don't. The elephants end up getting slaughtered by enemy pelters. The rest of our units that are flanking are going to get some kills, but at the end of the day, they're also going to get surrounded. Like I said, reinforcements are coming in. I will try to outflank them with our cavalry, which will give us a little bit more hope. And thankfully, the enemy was a little bit useless with some of its pikemen, so we could get in close quarters like here. So we will kill quite a few of their units due to them being careless, but they can afford to do it. They have so many men to throw at us, and we just don't. And by this point, about half of our army has been obliterated. And General Cherifon is basically just in a bit of a panic now. A lot of his units have routed. Of course, the true Spartan units are not routing. They're almost dying, fighting to the death, which is very impressive. And although not entirely unexpected, that is what a Spartan should do. But at this point, what is there for us to do but die? We've basically lost this battle, ladies and gentlemen. There were just too many Macedonians. We underestimated their skill and their professionalism. And so, in his last final act, General Cherifon will be making a last-ditch stand to allow the rest of his troops to retreat back towards Larissa and then possibly Athens to make a last stand against the Macedonians if necessary. If not, they will at least be able to replenish, regroup, and continue the war later on. General Narbus was already killed by this time. He was in the flanking group, or the flanking battle group that had charged him with the elephants. And so he was gone, and now we're about to lose General Cherifon, ladies and gentlemen. The hero of Pergamon, conqueror of Greece, conqueror of the East, conqueror of Anatolia. He's conquered a lot of territory for us. General Cherifon always fought side by side with his men. But it seems like it's pretty much all done here. The Macedonians instantly swarm his unit and surround him like locusts. There's just too many of them. And the rest of the army manages to retreat, though his death will not be in vain. A lot of our professional Spartan soldiers will be able to withdraw back to Larissa and continue the war from there. But ladies and gentlemen, this is our first major loss, probably for the entire campaign. We've taken some losses, we've lost some generals, but this is different. This is General Cherifon finally leaving us, ladies and gentlemen. He was one of our best generals, and now he's gone. It's a massive defeat, catastrophic, and we're not sure what will happen now moving forward. Here are these statistics, if you do want to see them, but here you can see this battle is basically doomed from the start. Over 10,000 Macedonians going up against just under 5,000 Spartans. Even though our Spartan troops are excellent in every single way, our auxiliaries just couldn't keep up to pace with the Spartan warriors, and just the map in general didn't provide us with the best way to deal with the enemy pikemen. Initially it was favorable, and it stopped them from having an excellent formation against us, but as time went on, Spartans just started to die way too quickly. The reach of the spear is just nowhere near good enough to that of a Sarissa pike. We lose thousands of Spartans in this battle. It is a absolutely catastrophic loss. General Cherifon's gone, General Narbus is gone. That's it. Here's his funeral. Like I said, the hero of Pergamon, conqueror of so many, and hero to all Spartans, is now dead. I can't lie, I got some feels when we lost General Cherifon. I could have save scummed it, but it would have felt like too much cheating. General Cherifon is now out for the count. See you later, mate. Thanks for your service, Sonny Jim.
War! Our gods demand it. Our ancestors love it.
But the show must go on, and instantly, after hearing the death of two Spartan generals, others start to jump on the Macedonian side. The Odrysian usurpers are now attacking us from the northeastern part of Thracia, and in addition, we will also lose some non-aggression pacts with other factions, such as the Kartli in the east, which is going to be a big issue for us, possibly. And then in addition, the Seleucids refused to join the battle against the Thracians, and as such, they already, after barely over a year, break the peace that we had fought so hard to achieve with them. And now the Thracians stab us in the back and attack Antioch. Although they do just sack the settlement, it is going to be a large setback, and now King Arius is at risk of being surrounded. So instead of sending King Arius down to Macedon to deal with the enemy troops there, he will now be marching northeast towards northeastern Thrace. In the meantime, though, we managed to recuperate our losses at Larissa. We do hire some mercenaries, but our economy is pretty weak at this point. I do have our taxes set to just normal, I believe, so I will need to pump that up in order to recruit some more units as soon as possible. But Larissa having no garrison, and it could be attacked literally in any turn, it's just not good enough, and so we're going to have to give up Larissa and fall back to Athens with the heroes of Pergamon army, and they will be responsible for recruiting and recuperating themselves so that they can march out again against the Macedonians. But for now, they're basically trying to hold out for survival in Athens. We did kill a lot of Macedonians, granted, but they can still recuperate their losses quite quickly. Back down south, though, towards Egypt in an entirely different theater of war, General Cleomenes is leading the invasion against the Siwa, and then followed by that will be the Egyptians. And here is the battle, ladies and gentlemen. We need something positive to recover us from the very deep low that losing General Cheraphon took us to. And so now we'll be looking at our new Syrian heavy archers. We're now getting auxiliary Syrians in addition to the mercenary ones. And then we have some Galatian swordsmen in the rear. And then behind them, we also have some thorax Spartan swordsmen. Basically, General Cleomenes, rest in peace, Cheraphon, my man, rip buddy. General Cleomenes, I should say, is now our leading reformer of the Spartan military and basically Spartan society. And as such, he will be leading a very reformed style army of swordsmen, auxiliaries, and of course, Syrian elephants in the rear. There is Cleomenes himself now. He is the heir to the Spartan Empire, and with General Cheraphon out of the way, there's basically no one threatening his status of being the next heir. Then we have some Galatians in the far rear who are looking away from the front line of the battle, combined with our elephants and Greek cavalry, because I know the Siwa are receiving reinforcements, and with the randomness of where reinforcements come from in this game, I'm just expecting anything at this point. The battle begins, though, by the city garrison coming out towards us. I have my archers at the very front, and so they must have thought that they could try to charge out and get some easy kills. But then I rushed my Galatians forward, and as such, the enemy army then returned back into the town to garrison it. So basically, we shut down that basically little rush tactic that they used against us almost instantly. We have a lot of archers in this army, so they will hopefully provide us with a lot of kills. The garrison tried to respond with their own archers, but once again, our Syrian heavy archers are just incredibly deadly, very accurate, very useful, and as such, they will just slaughter the enemy archers that try to stand against us. Within, again, just literally seconds, an entire unit is gone, and they don't have many more units besides that, at least none that are engaging us right now. But in the meantime, I finally see where some of the reinforcements have come from. This is the town garrison, and they have two armies reinforcing, but both those armies only have about 6 to 7 units each. So it's not a big deal, and we will divert troops to deal with them. But in the meantime, our front line towards the town is halted, and I'm going to wait to advance until we deal with the reinforcements first. So we'll be sending out our thorax swordsmen to get involved in the fighting. This will be their first proper test. We did have 2 units of thorax swordsmen in the loss at the Battle of Larissa, but now this is going to be different. This will be some head-on collisions and head-on charges against enemy units, so the thorax swordsmen will really be able to show their colors here and see if they are worthy to be recruited into Spartan professional armies. And we do, of course, have some elephants backing them up here. On the charge, they do fairly well. They don't have very high stats though regarding their armor penetration or their charge, so the main thing that they'll be doing is killing enemies over time. But they'll be doing it relatively quickly, just not instantly on the charge like, say, Galatians would, as they are a little bit more favorable towards charging. But regardless, our swordsmen get in and start doing some very nice handiwork, and then our elephants will come in as well. Try to back them up and deal with those elite pikemen that are there. The Siwa do have some Hellenic general units, which is interesting, or at least they have some Hellenic units. I think 1 or 2 of them were generals. But basically, they have quite good pikemen in their armies, and so we do need to be careful of that. And it did take a couple of charges, but eventually our swordsmen and our elephants will end up wiping out this group of reinforcements that's coming into the town. But it's not the only group that's coming in, and so we do need to be careful of that moving forward. There will be more reinforcements coming in, but I haven't seen the other groups yet, so they're most likely coming from behind the town, out of our line of sight. But yeah, our thorax swordsmen do very well in that first engagement. and they end up slaughtering the enemy. After that had happened, it is now time for us to push into the town. The Galatians will be leading the charge. We do have the Syrian heavy archers close behind them to try and provide some fire support, but the enemy does have units outflanking our own, so we're going to have to be fairly aggressive in how we push through. And thankfully, again, our Galatians do have their own javelins, and combining that with our archer fire, they're going to get a lot of free kills quite easily, which would be very, very helpful. I then moved my thorax swordsman on the right-hand side around the town flank, but we ended up bumping into even more reinforcements. It's not many though. It's basically townsfolk or peasants and levies. Nothing to be much of a threat there at all. And in the meantime, we're now fully committed to fighting in the town, and the enemy is fully committed to defending it. They are stopping us in the streets quite heavily, and we are relying on outflanking them to try and come in and break the stalemate that we've been locked into. Our thorax swordsman will be focusing on the right hand flank. However, ahead of them we will be again sending in the elephants. I'm trying some different strategies with my elephants. Generally, you just want to use them to recharge the enemy and they'll get massive amounts of kills. But here I'm trying to charge in from the front. The enemy had some small groups of archers in the center, and then they also had their main battle line over here towards the main center of town, holding down the main street. And so we scared away the enemy archers. We're going to charge into some of their lighter troops, and then we'll be charging into the blob. Basically, our elephants will be doing a lot of work, and the support is coming, but it's fairly far behind them, so we do need to hurry it up quite a bit. But as always, our elephants will be quite helpful, but it will not cause an instant rout of the enemy army. We still need to grind for quite a little bit. On the left-hand flank, my cavalry is also getting involved in outflanking, so that will help us out. Some of the more weaker and levy-style units will be routing, but it really takes our thorax swordsmen that charge in and start helping out our Galatians, who are taking losses now after fighting for a while, to win us the battle, which it's almost certainly looking like a win here, though. They don't really have anything to counter our cavalry or our elephants anymore. The few units of skirmishers they do have are pretty tiny, and they're getting chased down and slaughtered. And the main street battle is now going in our favor, and thankfully the Syrian heavy elephants do come back in and charge back into the main blob once again. And with this charge though, the enemy will break pretty much en masse, combined with General Cleomenes charging in and getting involved in the fighting himself. He is not as much of a fighter as General Cheraphon or King Arius. He's a little bit more strategic in his fighting, but he's still there nonetheless. But with that, we finally deal with the Siwa faction, and now it's time to conquer the rest of Western Libya. Here are the statistics if you do want to see them. As you can see, our elephants did great, Galatians did fantastic, and our thorax swordsmen in particular did very, very well, considering that they didn't lose many troops. They killed a lot of guys, and they didn't lose too many whatsoever. So perhaps it will be smart of us to try and comprise all of our armies out of thorax swordsmen and forget the pikemen battle formations. Who knows? I doubt it though. I think the thorax swordsmen will be excellent at outflanking the enemy, combined with some pikemen holding the main battle line. So I'll be going with that formula for armies moving forward when we do have time to recruit them all. But Ammonium is now ours. The Egyptians are basically our one enemy in North Africa now, I should say. And they do have quite a few armies here, but they're fairly split up, and they're fairly kind of just messy. The one stable army that they do have, which is led by the quote-unquote Pharaoh, or the imposter Pharaoh, we should say, since King Arius is the Pharaoh, is heading towards Cyrenaica, so that might be an issue. But in the meantime, let's take a little bit of a recap. So up here in Greece, we now currently own Larissa and Athens, and we have some territory in Thrace, but that is definitely in jeopardy with the Macedonians coming back and hitting us hard. They just, for whatever reason, were hiding their armies up in the mountains, and now they're pouring out en masse. And so that theater of war is looking very, very risky. We're probably going to have to divert another army or two from the east to try and help out our armies in the west, but I don't want to divert too many armies in the east, because, like I said, they currently broke their non-aggression pact with us almost instantly. And then the Seleucids also broke their client status with us after barely a year of being a client state for us. And even though I do have some armies on the border in the eastern Palmyra, Syria, and over in Galatia at Cappadocia, we do need to be careful, as those armies are not sufficient to take on massive factions like the Kartli, who are just monumental. They're incredibly big at this time. It's very impressive. Back down in Egypt, though, Arabia is looking good for us. We still have the Nabateans, who are quite friendly now to us. The rest of the Arabs are fighting amongst themselves in the Badawi to our south. And the Badawi is still kind of friendly towards us, but we need to be careful of that. I might do an invasion at some point just to earn a lot of money from it. Libya, though, is a bit of a mess, but we are starting to clean it up. We basically just need to take out the Egyptian settlement, and hopefully they don't take Cyrenaica. If they do, then we can just take it for ourselves, and all of Libya will be under our control. So it's not the worst thing in the world, but we do need to consider that then after that, we will be bordering Rome. And having Rome so close to our core region, Egypt, that's very scary and very risky, especially considering that we're planning for them to be like our endgame boss for this campaign. So that's going to be scary. But generally speaking, we're looking still fairly stable. It's just the Macedonian war is going quite poorly now after we had some initial success. But zooming out, we can see that there are a lot of larger factions that are appearing on the map, and so wars will become more risky, but there will also be more rewards available to those who are bold enough to seize it. Unfortunately, General Cheraphon was bold, but he was just far outnumbered, and even though he was probably the best Spartan warrior we've ever had and ever will have, he is now gone. But ladies and gentlemen, that's all we have for today, so I hope you enjoyed this 1 hour special. Thank you all for watching. Hope you guys enjoyed, and I shall see you in the next one.